Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Hello and good afternoon. Welcome back to Musical Musings, our latest episode. This program airs every Wednesday at 1 p.m. We broadcast this program from Rajamakan University of Technology, Pranikon. We bring it to you in two parts. In our first part of our Musical Musings program, we're going to discuss the song that we're going to talk about today. Talk about what it's about, the themes of the song, and we'll discuss the band a little bit as well. We'll then take a listen to the song, and then in the second part of our program, we're going to analyze the lyrics. We will pay particular attention to any difficult vocabulary, slangs, or sayings that could be hard for you to understand. We will then have the news and the latest updates from the university as usual.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Gary Gray, and I am your host for Musical Musings. I'm an American English teacher at Rajamakan University of Technology, Pranikon. I've been here for about 7 years teaching at the university. All right, for today's song, we're going to be doing a song called Africa by the band Toto. And the song, honestly, it's exactly what it sounds like it's about. It's about Africa. The guy who wrote the song, member of Toto, really just fell in love with Africa. I don't believe he's ever even been, well, maybe he's been there since he wrote the song, but before he wrote the song, I don't believe he'd ever even been there. But he just loved Africa, so he wrote a song about Africa. And that's it. Simple as that. That's what the song's about. Okay, so a little bit about this band. The name of the band is Toto. Toto. That is a weird name. Where in the world did they get that name from? Well, where they got the name from is also weird. Toto, the only time I have ever heard that word, name, anything like that before, Toto, it's from an old movie in America. Very popular, though. Even popular still today, which is surprising because it's very old. It's about 80 years old now. I think it came out in the 1940s, I think. I'm not entirely sure exactly when it came out. I think it was the 1940s. Could have been a little later than that since it was in color, but I think it was in the 1940s. The name of the movie is The Wizard of Oz. You might have even heard of it, because again, it's still even popular today. Not sure how popular it is here in Thailand, though, so I'm not sure if you would have heard of it, but that's the name of the movie, The Wizard of Oz, and in the movie there is a dog. The dog, its name is Toto. Toto. That's the only place I've ever heard of the name. Well, guess what? That is exactly where the band got the name for their band. It's just named after the dog in Wizard of Oz. I have no idea why they decided that was a good name for their band. So yes, it is a weird name. It's a weird name. Sure, it's a popular movie. Everyone kind of likes the little dog in the movie. The dog is there in the movie the whole time because the main character is Dorothy, and that's Dorothy's dog. So other than a brief time where someone takes the dog away from her near the beginning of the movie, other than that brief, short little time, the dog is there with her in the whole movie. So the dog's there the whole time. So everyone kind of likes Toto. But it's still a weird name to give to your band. That's where they got it from. Toto. It's the dog from Wizard of Oz. Okay. All right, and the band is an American band. They come from California, And those of you who listen to this program know that we love to do old bands and old music. This band is not quite as old as some of the ones we've done, but it's still pretty old. They formed in 1977. A lot of these bands are older than I am, and I'm not very young. These bands that formed, like last week we did a band called Fleetwood Mac, who formed in 1967. They became a band, so these were already adults before I was even born. So a lot of these bands that we do are quite old. Now, in 1977, for Toto, I was already born by then, so this band is a little bit, I was still quite young, but I was quite young at the time. So the members of this band are all older than I am. But I was at least around when they formed. So this band is a little bit more recent than some of the bands we've done in the past. Again, they formed in 1977. The genre of music that they do, it's a little bit mixed. It's hard to put into one category. They're just early enough so that they have a lot of classic rock and roll influences. Probably would not call them classic rock, though. But there's definitely a little bit of that style in there. Most of their band members were in bands before then, so they started performing before 77. So they've been around performing early, mid-1970s, when really classic rock was the strongest genre of music around. So they have a lot of the members have a lot of classic rock background. So there's certainly some of that in there. Some of their songs are also kind of pop songs. In fact, one of their most popular songs is called Rosanna. That's kind of pop music. Has kind of a pop sound to it. It's not entirely. It's not. I don't know that I would say it's exactly what I would define as pop music, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close. That's the song Rosanna. That's not the song we're doing today, but Rosanna is probably their number one song ever. Maybe. It's very close with this one. I didn't actually look up to see which one sold more albums or whatever. See which one rated higher. I'm not sure whether Africa or Rosanna did better. It could be Africa, which is our song for today, but Rosanna's right up there. Rosanna was very, very popular. I think probably a little bit more popular than Africa. But again, I could be wrong about that. I didn't look it up. But that Rosanna song is a little bit more poppy. I would have to say, though, if I were to put them into a genre, it would be progressive rock. Now, I explain on almost all of my episodes that I don't like putting music into genres. I don't like it. Music is an art. We go across genres, so genres don't matter. A song can mix multiple genres together. Multiple genres. One of my favorite bands, who we still haven't done a song on, I don't think, but I mention them from time to time, so we'll do them soon, is Styx. They're considered progressive rock, but they have a lot of classic rock background to them because they've been around since the 1960s, very late 60s, but they've been around since the 1960s. They also have a bit of a heavy metal vibe to them in some of their songs, so they do some heavy metal. They even have one or two songs where they've actually turned a classical song, like classical music, like Beethoven, Mozart, that type of music. They've turned a classical song into a rock song. So they even performed classical music, sort of in a way, transforming it into something that's more rock and roll. So they really combine a whole bunch of different genres. And that's what Toto does as well. I think most people, if you were forced to, you have to put it into one genre, I think most people would say Toto is progressive rock. But if someone told you something else, soft rock, classic rock, pop, there's elements of all that in there. I wouldn't really disagree. I think pop I'd probably disagree with the most. I'm not really sure they qualify as that. But like I said, probably one of the songs that qualifies the most in that category that they've done is Rosanna, and that's one of their most famous songs. So, you want to say they're pop? Okay, maybe. So, Toto really does cross a lot of genres. Okay. As I mentioned, the band members here in Toto do have an interesting history in that they all came from other popular bands. Now, of course, sometimes you get band members that leave and some that come in, so I'm not sure that all of their members that they've ever had over the history of the time they've been together have all come from other popular bands. But I mean their original cast of band members all came from other bands. And so because of that, all of their band members were very talented. They knew how to do music, write it, perform it, all of that. So they became popular very quickly. As I said, they formed in 1977, and in 1979, they had one of their biggest hits. I told you that Rosanna and Africa are two of their biggest hits. They did have another one that was also really big. They had several big hits, actually. But their song Hold the Line is also one of their biggest hits. I think it probably comes in a little bit below Africa and Rosanna, but not by a wide margin. It's very popular. So that came out in 1979. Only 2 years after they formed, they had one of their biggest hits. So, since that was their biggest hit, it was in 1979. Most of their popularity, as you can imagine, was actually in the 80s, even though they formed in the 70s. So most of their popularity was in the 80s, mostly in the early 80s. I was, because of when I was born, how old I was at the time, I was kind of growing up around then. So I remember a lot of their music when I was growing up. Okay, so the two people that really originated the band were David Paich and Jeff Porcaro. And I apologize to David if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. I've actually never heard anyone talk about him, so I've never heard his name pronounced. I've seen it written down several times, but never heard it pronounced. It's Paich is his last name, so I'm pronouncing it Paich. It could be Paich, could be some other pronunciation. So David Paich and Jeff Porcaro, they were the two that originated the band. Unfortunately, Porcaro, he died in 1992. Very sad. He wasn't very old at the time. But he died in 1992. And so Paich is really the only original band member that's still with them today. Sort of. I have to say sort of because obviously the band wasn't only two people when they started. So David Paich and Jeff Porcaro founded the band, but the band wasn't really a band until they got some more members to it, of course, because it wasn't just a two-person band. So there's another gentleman by the name of Steve Lukather, whose name I also may be mispronouncing. But there's another band member named Steve Lukather who pretty much joined immediately, and he is still with them. They still perform today. Toto is still around today. So David Paich and Steve Lukather still perform with Toto today. So Steve Lukather is sort of an original band member. He just wasn't a founder of the band. David Paich and Jeff Porcaro put the band together. But when they were grabbing people to be part of the band, they grabbed Steve Lukather right away. He joined immediately. So he is kind of an original band member. Okay, so now let's get to our song. So again, the name of the song is Africa. As I mentioned to you before, it's really just what the song is about. That's it. And it came out in 1982. And as I said, it might be the most famous song by Toto. Hold the Line, as I mentioned before, was very popular. Rosanna is right there. Rosanna might be more popular than Africa. Not sure. It's right there. But Africa might be the most popular. They're right there, number 1 and 2. Okay, and some of the song, Africa, some of it actually sounds like a romantic song, but that's mostly because it's referring to Africa as she. So when it says something like, what line in there? What line in there is a good one? I was trying to think of a good line where it has she in there. It doesn't come up that many times, but every once in a while it will refer to Africa as she. And it sounds almost like it sounds almost like there's a romance going on there. Like the guy, it's sung by a man, so it sounds like he's with a woman. He's not. And actually, when I look back at the lyrics, I think actually it only mentions she once, but it comes up, no, it is more than once, but it comes up pretty early in the song. So it sounds like it's talking about a woman. So this sounds like when we're talking about having love for something, we're talking about some romance. Now, it doesn't always sound like that. Sometimes in the song, it specifically refers to like African sites, so we're talking about Africa. Like you'll hear one line where it talks about Kilimanjaro and the Serengeti, and it's like, okay, what in the world are those? You might not know if you're not familiar with African geography. Those are places in Africa, so it's actually referring to specific places in Africa sometimes. So sometimes it's obvious that it's talking about Africa, but not always. So it kind of seems almost like a romantic song a little bit. It's really about just Africa. It's really a romantic song for Africa. That's what it's about. It's about love for the continent of Africa. So David Paish is the one that wrote the song. And he just came up with it because he saw a television documentary. He saw a program on TV about Africa, and he was amazed by it. He loved it. So he wrote a song about it. The song does get a little bit of criticism because he got a few things wrong. He was just taking it from a documentary, so some of the things in here aren't quite right. For example, I mentioned the line with Kilimanjaro and the Serengeti. It says that Kilimanjaro is basically in the Serengeti. Well, is it? I'll be honest with you, I don't know, but that could be one thing that's wrong. I actually honestly don't know. I honestly don't know that. I don't know. I'm pretty good at geography, but I'm not sure where Kilimanjaro is in respect to the Serengeti. All right. But there were some things that he got wrong, and so he did get some criticism for that. But mostly people liked it. In fact, I would say that it's a pretty important song. I'll talk about this a little bit later in our second half. I would say it's a pretty important song in that it at least brought attention to Africa. We'll talk about that a little bit later, in our program. So for now, though, let's just get on to the song. Okay, so as usual, anyone that's listening to us here on YouTube, you will want to click on the upper right-hand corner for a link to the video. Because of copyright issues, we cannot embed the video. So just click on that link in the upper right corner. You can jump to the song from there, and then just come back here once you're done listening to the song. Everyone else that's listening, you should have no trouble just listening to the song. We're going to play it right here in our stream. So let's get to this great song right now.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Okay, welcome back. So again, that song is just about Africa and a love for the continent. So let's get right to it. The first verse is, I hear the drums echoing tonight, but she hears only whispers of some quiet conversation. She's coming in 12:30 flight. The moonlit wings reflect the stars that guide me towards salvation. All right, so what does that mean? By the way, this first verse I'm kind of splitting in two. There's kind of like two parts to the verse before we get to the chorus. So what does this all mean? All right, I hear the drums echoing tonight. Okay, you might be familiar that drums are kind of a popular instrument in Africa. So that's all that's about. He hears the drums. It says, but she hears only whispers of some quiet conversation. What does that mean? I'll be honest with you, that line, I'm not really sure what it's referring to. But here again, we have that she. And then it says she's coming in 12:30 flight. That again sounds like, this is where it sounds like it's a romance. Almost sounds like the guy singing the song is waiting for her. So waiting for his girlfriend to arrive. She's coming in 12:30 flight. I actually think, and again, this is interpretation. I'd say in a lot of my programs that, the songwriter leaves a lot open for interpretation sometimes. And they don't ever tell you what they mean because they want you to interpret the song however you want to. I think, based on the next line, that she's coming in is referring to the plane. The plane is coming in at 12:30. A lot of times people will refer to places as she, like Africa. They'll also refer to big modes of transportation, like ships are often referred to as she. I don't know why we do that in Western culture. In English, it's just what we do. Like big ships are referred to as she. And so a big plane would probably also be referred to as she. The reason I think this is the plane is because it says, the moonlit wings reflect the stars that guide me towards salvation. Okay, so the moonlit wings. So he can see that the wings are lit up in moonlight. If you're on the ground and watching a plane come in, are you going to see the moonlit wings? Probably not. The moon is above it. Right? You can't see the moonlit wings. I don't know. I could be misinterpreting this. That's getting awfully specific here. Maybe the writer, David Page, didn't actually think that hard about this. But, if you're on the plane, especially if you have a seat that overlooks the wings, you can see the top of the wings. So you're going to see it being moonlit. So I believe he's on this plane. So he sees the moonlit wings and reflect the stars, and it says, guides me towards salvation. What he's talking about salvation, he's talking about, as you'll see at the end of the song, he's kind of discovering himself. So when he gets to Africa, he's discovering more things about himself. So he's finding more peace within himself. That's kind of his salvation. So he's finding salvation in Africa. So this is about him arriving in Africa. So she's coming in 12:30 flight. I believe she is the plane. The plane is coming in. And then it pauses before it says 12:30 flight. She's coming in, 12:30 flight. So the plane is a 12:30 flight. That's when the plane is landing. So I believe that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about himself being on this plane. She is referring to the plane here. She's coming in 12:30 flight. The moonlit wings reflect the stars that guide me towards salvation. Okay, so now he has arrived. And the second part of the first verse is, I stopped an old man along the way, hoping to find some old forgotten words or ancient melodies. He turned to me as if to say, hurry, boy, it's waiting there for you. Okay, so what does this mean? All right, first part, I stopped an old man along the way. Okay, he's just telling a story about actually doing that. Okay, obviously he didn't really do this. He took this, like I said, he took this from watching a documentary. So he's kind of just putting himself in this position. None of this actually happened, but he's just imagining this. So he stops an old man along the way, hoping to find some old forgotten words or ancient melodies. Ancient means really old. Melody is like a song, ancient melodies, so he's talking about old songs and old forgotten words. So what he's talking about here is the old cultures of Africa. If you're familiar with like the history of humans on Earth, you will know that everyone came from Africa. I know that may sound weird. Like I am a white person. people from Africa are black people. How does that happen? How did we all come from Africa? Well, part of the way your body works with vitamin D and things like that is you have vitamin D in your body, and the sun turns it into things in your body that cause your skin to change color. And so if you're in an area where there's lots of sun, you're going to tend to be darker. And so over many, 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 many hundreds and thousands of years, the people that lived in places that don't get as much sun, they turn more white. That's why, like, the whitest people in the world are in the furthest north places, like up in Scandinavia and Ireland and places like that. Just think about it with Asia as well. Where are the more dark-skinned Asian people live? It's usually places that are hotter, further south, places that get more sun. Like people from Cambodia and Vietnam tend to be a little bit darker, not a lot darker, but a little bit darker than people that are maybe from northern parts of China. It's because of the sun. So yes, we all came from Africa. It seems a little weird, I know, because we don't look the same now, but we all did. So that's the first place where people came from. So hoping to find some old forgotten words or ancient melodies. He's talking about the old cultures of Africa and how interesting and wonderful all of that is. And it's fascinating because there are so many different cultures. Because they've been there so long, they've been in those countries in Africa since before traveling was easy. So a lot of times we think of all of these Africans as being very similar when we think of like the old times, like with the tribes and everything. They're not. They're all very different. They're very different tribes. They have their own cultures, their own sort of music, their own languages. They're all very different. And Africa is a very huge continent, so there's all kinds of different people, different cultures, different songs. So he's hoping to find some old forgotten words and ancient melodies. He wants to hear some of their old music. And then the old man, he turned to me as if to say, "Hurry, boy, it's waiting there for you." So he's just basically telling him, yes, go, find it. It's here. It's here in Africa. So this is, like I said, this is a love song towards Africa. Yes, all of these traditions are still there. And there are a lot of these old cultures, they've kind of hung on, at least parts of it. A lot of them are more modern now. Like a lot of parts of Africa, especially if you go to the cities, they're very modern. But out sort of in the more rural areas, you still have a lot of tribes, and they still have a lot of the old tribal traditions and cultures. So it's all still there. It's all still there from hundreds of years ago, maybe even thousands of years ago. Okay, so that's what that song's about. We're celebrating the ancient cultures of Africa. Now we get to the chorus. It's gonna take a lot to drag me away from you. There's nothing that 100 men or more could ever do. I bless the rains down in Africa. Gonna take some time to do the things we never had. Okay, I sang that a little bit incorrectly. Sorry about that. But the words, let's get to the lyrics. It's gonna take a lot to drag me away from you. All right, when we talk about it's going to be hard to drag me away from something. To drag something means you're pulling it along. And if you're talking about dragging a person, which that's usually not a good thing. You don't usually want to be dragging a person. But if you're dragging a person, it usually means they are resisting. They're not going with you willingly. So it's going to take a lot to drag me away from you. In other words, he doesn't want to go. You're going to have to drag him away. He wants to stay in Africa. He loves Africa. He wants to stay there. In fact, it's going to take a lot of people to drag him away because there's nothing that 100 men or more could ever do. That's going to take hundreds of people to drag him away. Okay, then he says, I bless the rains down in Africa. All right, that's because Africa doesn't get a lot of rain. Most of it. There are some places that do, actually. But a lot of Africa does not get a lot of rain. So he's blessing the rains. He's basically saying the rains are a good thing. He loves it when it rains in Africa. And then he says, going to take some time to do the things we never had. Never had. That phrase there actually even confuses me a little bit. Never had. To have something, that means you hold something. That means you own it. To do things that you never had, that doesn't make sense. But I believe he's just shortening that when he says things we never had. He means things we never had done. So in other words, there's a lot of stuff he's never done in his life. And in Africa, life tends to be a little bit slower. They don't have a lot of the same problems we have in the modern world. I mean, some places do. Like I said, the cities are pretty modern, but it sounds like he's not talking about being in the cities because he's seeking out the ancient melodies, the old cultures. He's looking at like tribal areas and things like that of Africa. So it moves a little slower. It's more relaxed. You have more free time. So he's going to take time to do things that he's never done before. That's what that line means. Going to take some time to do the things we never had. Because it's a much quieter, slower, more calm feel. So he has time to do things that he's never done before. Okay, we get to the next verse. The wild dogs cry out in the night, as they grow restless, longing for some solitary company. I know that I must do what's right, as sure as Kilimanjaro rises like Olympus above the Serengeti. I seek to cure what's deep inside, frightened of this thing that I've become. All right, so what does that all mean? All right, the wild dogs cry out in the night, as they grow restless, longing for some solitary company. All right, so the wild dogs crying out in the night. Once again, I think he's just referencing this to make sure we know what part of Africa we're talking about. We're out in the rural area. We're with the tribes. We're not in the cities. We're in the area where it's calm. Well, maybe not too calm and quiet because we hear the wild dogs crying out. But it's generally calm, quiet, peaceful, tranquil area. And the dogs are restless because they're longing for some solitary company. Solitary means to be alone. So really all they're looking for is one other dog to have a companion. That's all they're looking for. Because again, it's very quiet out there. There aren't even a lot of these dogs out there. So the dogs are crying out for one other dog to come visit them. Longing for some solitary company. So it's just a very quiet, calm environment. Then it says, I know that I must do what's right. Now, this is another line where we have to kind of interpret it. What does that mean? What does it mean, do what's right? Well, I think we're just talking about doing what's right for him. Because remember, he talked about guiding himself towards salvation. And we're going to see in the very next two lines where he talks about curing what's deep inside. He's talking about like fixing himself. So he's doing what's right for him. And then he says, as sure as Kilimanjaro rises like Olympus above the Serengeti. Okay, Kilimanjaro is a mountain, and the Serengeti is like a big field. Well, a field, that sounds small. It's like a giant plain, like miles and miles and miles. So big that it has a name. You can think of it like a big giant desert, except this is more like a field. The Serengeti. So the Kilimanjaro, it says it rises like Olympus. Olympus is a big mountain. It's a big Greek mountain. So Kilimanjaro is a big mountain. And it's kind of by itself, sort of by itself. So it's a big mountain by itself. So it rises above everything else, above the Serengeti. Again, that may not actually be accurate. That's the way he portrays it in the song. Okay. So when someone says as sure as something, it means it's definite. And when they give their example, as sure as what, whatever they say, as sure as Kilimanjaro rises like Olympus above the Serengeti, when they give their example, they're going to give an example of something that's unquestionable. This is certain. Even though, like I said, it might be a little bit wrong here. But it is definitely certain that Kilimanjaro is a very big mountain in Africa. So yes, Kilimanjaro does rise above everything. Yes, that is certain. So what he's saying is, I know that I must do what's right as sure as this. So what he's saying, all he's doing there is emphasizing the must, that he must do what's right as sure as this. This is an absolute certainty. So he really has to do what's right. So what is it that's right? This comes the last two lines. I seek to cure what's deep inside, frightened of this thing that I've become. All right, so basically that means that's really not that big of a mystery. He's talking about what he's become, so he doesn't like what he's become. And, you know, there are a lot of bad things in kind of our modern world, in our society right now. Like, a lot of people are always worried about money. And it's understandable. You kind of have to be. You need to be able to afford food and rent and whatever else you need. So it's reasonable to be concerned about that. But, yeah, you know, it kind of makes us focused on the wrong things sometimes. We should be more worried about the people we love, be worried about each other. That's really what our concern should be in life, right? Because we want everyone wants to have a good life, right? So we want to be happy. We should also want to make other people happy. So we should be concerned about the people we love. That's what life should be about, right? It isn't always true. So sometimes we kind of lose focus on what is important in life, and that's normal. That's not really a criticism of people. We all do it. I do it. It's normal. Like I said, you need money. You need things. You need to be able to survive. So we focus on the wrong things sometimes. And so that's why he says he's frightened of this thing that I've become. Because probably, knowing his lifestyle, this is a professional star singer singing this song, he's probably really just chasing down different things he wants, chasing down stardom or money, fame, things like that. He doesn't like it. Yeah, and usually people that are doing that, it's because they're missing something. They're missing something. They don't have a relationship. They don't get the love or appreciation that most people should get. So they're missing something. So he's seeking to cure what's deep inside. I seek to cure what's deep inside, frightened of this thing that I've become. And that's what he gets back to what he talks about at the very beginning of the song, when he talks about the moonlit wings reflect the stars that guide me towards salvation. He's looking to save himself, to find himself, to discover who he really is. He doesn't like who he's become. And if you don't like who you've become, it's probably because it's not who you really are, like deep down inside. You know that's not you. That's why you don't like it. If it really was you, you probably wouldn't care. There are some people who chase fame and fortune and money, and they really don't care. They're fine with that. They don't think there's anything wrong with that because that's who they are deep inside. They're okay with that. So in this case, the songwriter, David Paich, probably is not okay with that. He's probably not. And I would believe that, actually. I don't know too much about the band members, but a little bit I do know about them. These band members are actually not kind of your typical superstar that you think about, superstar musician. These are a bunch of very kind of down-to-earth, normal, good people. So it's probably actually a real song about himself. He probably doesn't really like what he's become, at least at times. He is still a good person, as far as, like I said, the little bit I know about him. So I don't think it's as bad as he makes it sound. But, you know, he's just kind of looking at himself and saying, well, I don't really like that I'm doing this or that or whatever. So he's looking to cure what's deep inside, frightened of this thing that I've become. And the beauty of Africa is because of this slow, quiet nature of the country, he's able to do that. He can take some time to do the things he never had. So he can find himself, discover himself. So that's why he loves Africa. That's why he wrote this song about Africa. It's a peaceful, wonderful place with a lot of great history that allows you to go there and find yourself, rediscover who you are. That's what this song is about. All right, so that's all for this song. And I mentioned to you at the first part of the program that I was going to tell you why I think this song is kind of important. The reason this song is kind of important, I think, in my opinion, is because it came out when a lot of people weren't really thinking about Africa. And Africa had a lot of problems at the time. They still do, actually, even today. It's certainly better than it was, a lot better. But there's still a lot of problems. But they had tremendous problems back in the 1980s, especially in the 1980s, although because they had an epidemic with AIDS, it really even lasted into the 90s and 2000s. But they had other problems in the 80s that were really bad. And the AIDS problem did start there in the 80s as well. But they had other problems as well with starvation and things like that. So what's really nice about this song and why it's important is because, like I said, it came at a time when a lot of people really never even thought about Africa. Nobody really cared about what was going on in Africa, especially in the Western world, like in America, where he's from. And you may remember a few weeks back, we did the song USA for Africa. Clearly, everyone's thinking about Africa then. But that song came out several years after this song. So this is a really unique and interesting song. Africa was going through a really difficult time, and no one was paying attention to it. So it was really great to bring attention to it. In fact, this song may have, it's kind of hard to really know exactly the way society evolves, changes, thinks, things like that. But it's possible that this song actually led to USA for Africa. This song might have brought Africa more into the consciousness of people, so they realized what was going on there. And then several years later, the USA for Africa song came out. We Are the World, that's actually the name of the song. USA for Africa is like the name of the group that came together. The name of the song is We Are the World. So that's when USA for Africa and We Are the World came together several years after this. Now, we can't really say for sure whether or not this song led to that, but it certainly did help bring attention to Africa. So I think this is a really important and beautiful song. It's also just a really good sounding song, so you should check out more from this band. I always tell you that in every one of these episodes. When we come to the end, I tell you to check out more music from the band, and you should do that with these guys. They have, as I said, they have a couple more really big hits, like Hold the Line and Rosanna. They have a bunch of hits that are a little bit lesser, but still really good. So there's plenty of songs you can check out from them. But I really recommend at least checking out Hold the Line and Rosanna. Those are two really good songs. And again, the band name is Toto, T-O-T-O. So check out those songs. Thank you for once again joining us for our Musical Musings program. Please stay with us. And make sure you tune back in next week where we will have another great song for you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Musical